of small and medium enterprises. The business angle to this is immense, and what happens going forward might determine the fate of many small and medium enterprises. He will also be painting us the picture of the business environment in the country, whether we are good enough or we should tighten our belts. Gentlemen, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you.
A very good morning.
Good.
We're glad to have Honorable Mwinempaka with us, Chairman of the Select Committee on NSSF. What do you make of the latest report on National Social Security Fund as outed by the IGG?
Well, I want first to thank the IGG for the wonderful work done, but however, our terms of references were different. The IGG's report basically is responding to the issues the minister, the 15 allegations. Towards the end, the IGG responds to a few issues of the Select Committee, but our terms of reference were different. The Select Committee was to investigate, first of all, the safety of the savers' money. The second was to establish issues surrounding the corporate governance and NSSF. The third was to investigate the circumstances surrounding the appointment of the MD. The fourth was to investigate any matters incidental thereto. And the fifth, if I remember well, but there were 5 generally. So our terms of reference were to investigate the entire NSSF, which we did in a 2 weeks period. The IGG, on the other hand, was to investigate the 15 allegations against Byarugaba. So our terms of reference were different, and that's why the IGG's report is addressed to the minister, because she's responding to the minister's queries. So I think our terms of reference were different. Ours was much deeper than what the IGG has done. But towards the end, she responded to a few issues in our report, and we, much as we appreciate, she recognized some of the issues we raised, but the conclusion was different. For example, you tell Byarugaba and the CFO to pay 4-point-something billion for the retirement, the staff that were retiring. Yet it is true, because they sat at Serena Hotel and at Serena Chigo and agreed on how to pay this staff, but it was a decision taken by EXCOM, the executive committee, and it went up to the board approved. So I believe, much as I believe it is true, I believe they are going to get a way around it through their insurance policy, because it was a decision taken by the staff of NSSF. But the other issue she talks about is Sajabi. Parliament had recommended he is prosecuted according to Section 13 of the Anti-Corruption Act on grounds of nepotism, where he employed his sisters and nephews. And the IGG appreciates. She says it is true. He employed his relatives, but the IGG says there is no evidence he was involved. But the Select Committee took note of the Human Resource Manual, specifically paragraph 3.22 of the NSSF, which states that you cannot supervise your relatives. They should not be at any one point under your supervision. Further, it was brought to our attention that the same Sajabi nominates someone on the panel that interviews all these people going to work in his department. So there's no way you can say he was not involved. And if at all it was genuine, he should have raised it as per the Human Resource Manual that his relatives are under his department.
All right. The IGG, on one of the issues, of course, finds that board members don't possess, as she puts it, the core competences required to supervise the fund. Did you find that?
Well, I don't know what competences she wanted specifically, because when you look at the composition of the board, for example, there are 4 people from the unions, there are 2 people from the employers, and there's a chairman, there's a permanent secretary from Ministry of Finance, and these are specified in the law.
That's right. So
I think you'd have to amend the law if you're looking for specific qualifications.
Okay, let me come to Chairman General Asha Wilson Owere. As National Organization of Trade Unions, you are part of the board, or you nominate an individual. First and foremost, before we get to the nitty-gritty of whether the board should be constituted as is, first, what's your take on the latest report, and do you agree with the IGG, especially with regard to what she makes of former MD Byarugaba hand in the mess at NSSF?
No, first of all, I want to thank the IGG. The report was so well articulated, but the conclusion was a bit suspicious, because you cannot exonerate somebody from all the allegations that were put against him. And then when you are concluding, you say he must pay the money that it was paid to the 2 board members who existed. I was in that meeting, and I want everybody to know this, that the minister herself initiated a meeting between all the stakeholders. And in that meeting, she actually categorically told us that she's under pressure from the women, that the board was not well constituted. And she wanted the women to be represented on the board. So her directive was that she wants 2 men to leave and create a room for women.
In line with diversity, of course.
Yes, in line with diversity. So in that meeting, it was agreed, if that is the case, some people can volunteer. But then in that meeting, all the stakeholders, that is the Federation of Uganda Employers, not to COF2, the 2 ministers, including the late, and then including the Attorney General, who is also the minister. So we both agreed that, okay, if that is the case, then the men, any of them can volunteer. But the process must follow the procedure. Now in that process, they were supposed now to go through the board and then accept. And like Honorable Parker has explained, the procedure was followed up to the letter, and the board made a decision. Okay. Now, once the board has made a decision, there's no way now you can come down and ask the manager to pay all that money. It's being unfair. But the whole report, I want to thank Honorable Kamia and her team for a very good report. There are areas where we also question that report, but it was explained to me that there are issues that was raised by the parliamentary committee, especially on people who nominated themselves on the board, and then there are some money which was being paid to people in a very funny way. That was not reflected, but they explained to me that they were not supposed to retouch the parliamentary report. Their main agenda was to look at the complaints, allegations raised by the minister.
All right, Mwene Parker, Honorable, you'll be telling us later, just shortly, where we are with regard to the recommendations of the Select Committee and whether it's helping in addressing some of the challenges that National Social Security Fund continues to face. Allow me ask John Walugembe, the business environment in the country is already hard-pressed with a lot of challenges, and NSSF being a holder of a lot of cash in the nation is looked at as a possible source of money, given the modalities that government can twist here and there to be able to get it. This report must be, I don't know whether it's well received by the business community or it simply adds to the tension and anxiety.
Okay, first of all, I want to say that the employers should actually have a bigger stake in NSSF. Remember, the employee pays 5%, the employer pays 10%. So I don't understand why it's the way it is, because we pay more money into that fund. So that would be my starting point. I think that employers pay money, and I think we don't have as much of a voice as we should have in that fund. as a starting point.
That's
Two,
right.
this report simply adds to the confusion and dwells a lot on what I would call trivialities. Because if you look at some of the 15 issues, they talk about a smart card, they talk about a pension. These are very kind of operational issues that shouldn't, they should, because when you hire a manager should be allowed, because the very task of managing an organization means you get some things right, you get some things wrong. So we shouldn't penalize managers who make certain decisions, because if everyone second-guessed every decision a manager makes, you should appreciate that everyone would be caught on the wrong side of the law. But I would agree that the IGG exonerates the MD, but then makes some problematic recommendations. This 4.4 billion that he says they should refund that were paid to employees, it doesn't make sense, because if it was a ministerial directive, the IGG is shying away from saying that the minister gave a wrong directive and so on. Now she's hiding behind the employees who were forced to take the decision, and then she's asking them to pay the money. How can they pay the money when they didn't receive it? At the very least, she would have asked that the people who took the money, the employees who went on early retirement, should be asked to refund that money. But the message it sends, if I don't know how much money this gentleman is paid plus the CFO, but if you ask a public servant to refund 4.4 billion, what are you trying to say? You're saying they have...
The last time I checked, Richard Byarugaba was getting about 39 million Uganda shillings monthly.
If you ask him to pay 4.4 billion, what are you trying to say? You're trying to say that they have the means. Where can they get 4.4 billion, which they didn't receive? So I find the report simply adding to the confusion and not aligned to the earlier findings, because here they say, oh, he did a good job, he grew the fund, which is okay. Says then it says he took some problematic financial management decisions, but then exonerates him from everything. No evidence, no evidence, no evidence, no evidence, no evidence. But then at the end of that day, you refund 4 billion. So I think this simply,
of course, as the managing director, his job description is to take the hard decisions, and that could be just one of them. But allow Honorable Mwinempaka to tell us, could there be a case of IGG protecting the minister here?
Well, I think in one way or the other, when I read the report, the IGG in some instances has become political. Because the minister is the one who requested for this investigation. For example, when the issue my colleague has just raised of the board members who retired, on 17th January 2023, there was a meeting at Simambayo, if I've spelled it correctly, Simambayo House, chaired by Simbamanyo, yes, chaired by the Honorable Minister, Honorable Betty. And this is the meeting where the Attorney General was and the board members, and they all agreed. Because the minister raised the concern of the board composition as per Article 21 and I think 30 of the Constitution for gender equality. And it is that meeting where they agreed that 2 people should give way for female representation. And they agreed that it should come from not 2, and employers of Employers Federation, that was Bamwesije and Julius Bahemuka. So the decisions came from the board, and on the board the managing director is just an ex officio. He has no vote. So if the board takes a decision, and in our report we agree this matter should be returned, but for us we say the board members who took that decision. The only reason the minister survived is she escaped when the board chairman wrote to her and asked her, told her that they had agreed to compensate this amount of money to the board members who are retiring. She wrote back saying, do it within the law. That's the only reason we didn't implicate her in that decision. So we told the board members who took the decision to refund that money. Again, when you look at the IGG's report on the minister, specifically section 29, it clearly states that the minister has the mandate and authority to amend and pass the budget with with any amendments as she may wish. And that's what the IGG talks about. But the IGG does not talk about where the 6 billion was going. Because in our findings, we had conclusive evidence that actually this money was going to the Ministry of Gender, and Section 4 of the NSSF Act clearly states that all the money must be invested in a profitable and secure way to the interest of the saver. So that's why we implicated the minister in a case of abuse of office, because for you to take money to a ministry, it would mean you are appropriating money of the saver to carry out ministry activities. So I think because the minister asked the IGG to carry out this investigation, some way or the other, the IGG tried to balance. But I still think the saver's money is not safe, because as per our findings, there's failed corporate governance at NSSF. And just like you see Greenland, the former Greenland, it collapsed because of corporate governance. And we have a worry of that suspense account where money is being deposited, and this is money that doesn't belong to anyone as per now. For example, your company will give money to NSSF without indicating the specific people who are going to benefit. All that money goes to that suspense account. So during our investigation, we realized that in one financial year it could be 50 billion, the other year it is 100 billion, the other year it's back to 30 billion. And the only response NSSF gave us was they are clearing the suspense account. But when we looked at the board minutes, at one point the board recommended that they withdraw 200 million from that suspense account to cater for 2 board members' travel, which means it could also be used as petty cash. But we didn't have enough time to carry out a forensic audit. We requested the Auditor General to do this on our behalf, because it would take almost 6 months plus. And our terms of reference were given to us clearly, and we had to do our investigation in less than 3 weeks.
Asha Wilson-Awere, the concerns raised there of the suspense account means there is a lot of grey areas on what is happening. As a board member, as Noto, you followed this and you've been in the thick of it. How best do we move forward in realigning how the things are at NSSF? Because we are at the point of risking making this another discussion where we shall lament and talk about the things, and then things will go on as they've been going on at NSSF and any other government or agency for that matter. How do we move forward? You've had proposals brought through, some controversial, you've been in the news, on how best the workers' savings can best benefit them, because that is the fundamental question.
No, first of all, I want to appreciate the report that came out from Parliament. It was very, very comprehensive. And even the IGG. Now, even the government instituted its own investigation, but that one is consumed by the head of state.
The head of state, yeah.
Now, what we need from NSSF is a good political will, whereby most of the things that have been unearthed, we quicken the process of handling this issue. But the recommendation of the IGG saying that the managing director and the finance manager should refund the money creates a lot of confusion. Because I expected the IGG to have made a very good recommendation on how we can kickstart and rebuild the NSSF. But all said, what is needed now is to realign the organization and come back to its operation. First of all, there were issues that were raised, which is pertinent. The Honorable Member of Parliament has highlighted, they said there's an issue of governance. And in their report, they discovered that there are some people who are nominated on the board unfairly. That should be addressed very, very fast. Issues that were raised and must be done away with as soon as possible.
Quickly, Honorable Mpaka, you will be telling us, you are in the corridors of power. As a chairman of a select committee, you know behind the scenes some of the things Chris Higenyi doesn't know. I'll be asking so you can tell us. But before you do, let's conclude the issue of workers' contributions with Mr. John Walugembe on how best this can be, the process can be reconstructed so that what is seen as irregular contributions, the fact that the Honorable says there is fluctuation, this year it's 90, 30, we do not know when there is that gap, who gets away with what. Has there been any conversation or direct effort from the employers to engage NSSF or the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development on how best this can be addressed?
No, I think my understanding is that this is more of a slush fund that can be deployed anyhow with limited scrutiny. And I think for us, because this is something you can't stop. Some people send contributions, will not send the numbers and so on. So the money will come in, but you won't have a way to attribute it to who. So what we can do, what the UK did it at some point.
Okay.
You had all this money in financial institutions that was not attributed, that couldn't be recovered. Either the person passed out and didn't claim it and stuff like that. They put it in a private equity fund that startups would apply for and use to kickstart their businesses. 50 billion is not small money, for instance.
Yeah.
So if we got 50 billion per year into a fund that supports small businesses, because remember, now you've changed the law. All these guys have to contribute 10%. So if I'm contributing 10%, the employee is contributing 5%, but I'm still the one paying that person. See?
That is right.
I'm still the one paying that person. So the survival of this business is critical. The survival of this survival of that business is critical to NSSF's activities. So that, for me, that would be a suggestion that I have. Other people would have other suggestions.
I think there's something I want to
we have to go for a break. I'm going to have to start with you on that and also clarify what would be, why would the slush fund survive when a saver has...
It's morning at NTV. Thank you so much for keeping it here. Stephen Imbido on Fefeswe Chibuga, now coming to you live from the Spring and Port Bay Road here next to Chichintale and Bugolobi. You can see there, if you are still coming from any of this direction, any of these areas, that is Mbuya, Bugolobi, Chichintale, Luzira, and Chireka. If you're connecting towards the side of industrial area and you are going through this other side of Mutungo, Kunya, heading towards the Bugolobi market, that's when there is an interruption because of the KCCA contractors who are on ground here trying to make extensions and upgrade of this Chichintale, Old Port Bay Road and Spring Road heading towards the city. They are causing some delays for you who is driving there as you head towards Bugolobi. But away from that, you can be sure that you continue driving, though at a slow pace. And for you who is a pedestrian coming from Chichintale side, there is a warning that there is a excavation, just a slight place for you who is walking. Some contractors here trying to make sure that they make the road and construct it before the end of this year to extend it at least a little bit longer. Let me wind up by showing you what's happening here, where the contractors are working on this drainage channel that is along this Old Port Bay Road. Guys are already on the ground, so if you're driving from Chichintale, you will be slowing down because the road is a little bit, you have to use one lane. For you who is coming and heading towards Chichintale side, is too narrow for now because works are ongoing there at just opposite Shell Chichintale here as you make your way towards the Chichintale markets. Traffic and travel update coming to you here on Morning at NTV. I'll be handing you back to Chris Higenyi for the rest of the programming here on Morning at NTV, but I'll also be speaking to you later on. Back to you, Chris Higenyi, in the studios.
Thank you, Stephen Mbide, for the traffic update there. The traffic in Kampala alone is also a debate for another day, given the fact that there's so much that is going on. But let's return to studio and continue with our discussion where we are examining the IGG's report on NSSF and her controversial recommendations and conclusions on what the minister has as issues on her desk. We shall also be delving into the road to recovery. Where can we as a country redeem our social welfare system so that the likes of NSSF can be bastions of social welfare development instead of hubs of controversy and corruption. I'll return to my guests. Asha Wilson Owere, the Chairman General of the National Organization of Trade Unions, is on my immediate left. Next to him is John Walugembe, the Executive Director of the Federation for Small and Medium Enterprises, and on my extreme left, the Honorable Mwine Mpaka, the MP for Mbarara City South and Chairman of the Select Committee on NSSF. Before we went for the break, Asha Wilson Owere, you were itching to tell us something. Please.
There's something Mr. Walugembe was saying about contribution.
Contributions, yeah.
You said we contribute 5% and he contributes 10%.
Though technically it's the employer that's...
but you should know that that is part of our sweat.
Yeah.
Though is making it as
hey,
it's money.
Making it look like it's the employer's money. Employee's sweat.
It's employee's sweat.
You express the fact that at the end of it all, the 5% and the 10% is all your money as an employer.
The 5% is from the employee.
Yes.
Pick it from their salary. The 10%
is
it's a contribution. It's clear it's an employer's contribution.
But so still,
ultimately, the money
is from the employer.
All the money comes from the... Once the business collapses,
it's still
both the employee and
it's our labor.
Okay.
Now, there's something which is very, very clear that we need to understand. This whole saga was started by the minister. It was started by the minister. Something which was supposed to be administrative and so on was blown out of proportion, and at the end of it all, it has caused more problems to the fund. And you know, once this fund fear noises. Yeah. You know, this is a fund where there are so many stakeholders.
That is right. And
the more we dance on this, the floor on this issue, without making a decision. So my immediate request is to ask the Fountain of Honor to make a quick decision on this matter, because this matter has dragged on for almost now coming to 6-7 months, and it's not doing well for the well and the economic being of the fund. So the decision is so political that needs a political decision, because when you look at the whole circumstance, what is surrounding this issue, is that the IGG is also now becoming too political. And you find that Has
the IGG's office ever been less political?
That one I will not go into that.
Okay.
But in this particular case, I want this issue to be resolved
once and
for all. And my request to the head of state, the whole issue is on his table. And it needs a political decision now, not never. Because let me just finish one
please
point.
Do.
You know, NSSF had a lot of scandals. But in 2009, we stood up as workers and said, no, government, stop this interference. That's when we brought in all the stakeholders. And that's why the fund took position and actually became vibrant. But today, what we worked on in 2009 is back again. And there must be a decision now or never.
Honorable Mwine Mpaka, you are in the corridors of power at Parliament. Has there been any whisper? Have you heard anything about what the president is perhaps planning to say? Should this matter be addressed on the president's table? That's the question.
Well, we as Parliament, we passed a report. It's no longer a report of the Select Committee, it's now a report of the entire Parliament, 11th Parliament. we are yet to see action taken in as far as our findings and recommendations. When you look at the IGG's report, even those matters we sent to her office, for example, to do an audit of all the departments, she says she needs more resources. We asked her to investigate the officers who are involved in the geo-mapping. She said she needs more time. We sent some issues to the DPP. We are yet to see action. So personally, until there's political will, I think, to fight corruption, we may not see much, because we did our job as members of parliament. We are only waiting for decisions to be taken.
Let me ask a sweeping question, one that I should receive an answer from all of you. The anxiety created by a multiplicity of investigations, delayed reports, controversial reports when they finally come out, some with different conclusions. Where does social welfare stand on this when we have all what appears to be a circus parade?
Okay, so first of all, I would say that from a fund, if you're a fund manager, you want positive news. Like they say, capital is very, very, very shy.
Yeah.
So if you're sitting on a fund of 17 trillion, you don't want these kinds of scandals coming up here and there. I think over the last 10 years, we've had a certain level of stability. But where I disagree with Story is that there have also been some challenges, and I think part of the investigation has revealed that yes, whereas on the outside everything looked calm, but internally there were some issues that needed fixing. What I don't agree with is the strategy of fixing through exposure. See, sometimes if you have an internal problem, you don't have to fix it through naming and shaming sometimes. Because like these 15 issues, they are very operational, smart card. Why do we care about this? Yes, they might have had some, but those are very operational issues. We want to look at the strategic management decisions. And if that is right, I think it's very easy to solve the rest. Now, the other issue also is that you have this challenge with NSSF now that I think is most urgent, the problem of dual reporting. Even you, Chris, you cannot report to two people. The moment they give you two bosses to report to, it wouldn't work. You would clash. One would say do this, another would say do the other. See? So now, on one hand, they say Minister of Finance is in charge of investment, but Minister of Gender is in charge of the budget. How is that possible? I thought the budget is a tool that aids your investment decisions. So this issue of having a dual reporting of NSSF, I think, has to be resolved as soon as possible. The other issue that I see is also with the constitution of the board. Yes, it's good that we have representation from employers, we have representation from workers, but you also have some what they call non-executive board members, people who bring external experience and external perspective who are not internally interested. The other issue is that you also see a lot of compromise, you see, because now the board members who are seated on the association, when you investigate, like they say that association received 100 million for corporate social responsibility. Again, you're a board, you're a stakeholder, you're seated on the board. Again, you're receiving money for CSR. How? Then then the minister herself says, now she's supposed to review the budget. So she reviews it, but for her benefit. Says, now I have reviewed it, but 6 billion has to come to me. Now who will supervise you? So those are all issues, I think. That
Asha Wilson Owere, the multiplicity of investigations, reports, some coming late, others, well, controversial when they do. Does this solve the problem, or we need a completely new approach to how we deal with most of our challenges?
We need a new approach, but the new approach which you had brought in was the dual management. Actually, dual management is solving a lot of issues. Leave alone the controversy where finance, you know, I want to explain something about dual management. You know, finance, when the president ordered that this fund goes to finance, NSSF has been in finance just on the corridors. It had no department, you can agree with me on that. There was no department in Ministry of Finance responsible for. So it was issue between the MD and the other one. So for us, as far as social security is concerned, there was nothing in Minister of Finance that was guiding. The policy remained in the Minister of Gender. The money went to finance. So there was a lot of contradiction. But we have now brought all the parties together. The only problem which came up was when the minister, like he said, most of them are administrative approach that would solve this problem. But he went out of proportion. And you know, when you're a minister and you start managing by fault finding, it becomes a problem. And that's where there's a problem. So the issue here, I don't romance with the words. There must be a change of leadership. There must be a change of political leadership under all these ministries, Minister of Finance and Minister of Gender, to create a new life so that things can start working in a proper way.
I don't know how that will work, given the fact that appointments to ministerial positions are also political. Legislative reforms, the NSSF Act, when it comes to dual reporting, that can be resolved. Are we anywhere on that?
Well, we recommended an amendment. The fact is the dual reporting, like my colleague has stated, it cannot work. We have an incident, for example, on 14th February 2023, when the Minister of Finance, Matia Kasaija, invited the Minister of Gender to his boardroom. They had a meeting in regards to the 6 billion. The meeting was hot, according to the witnesses that appeared before the committee, and the Minister of Gender stormed out when the Minister of Finance cautioned her on appropriating money from NSSF to her ministry. So we don't even have an option of conflict resolution within this act. First of all, they are both cabinet ministers. One is in charge of investment as per section 30, that is the Minister of Finance. As per section 29, the Minister of Gender is in charge of approving and passing the budget. So now, how do you bring a budget that has investment without going through the Minister of Finance? First of all, it will cause delays. When it comes to investment, you have to take the budget first to the Minister of Finance to approve, then bring it back to the Minister of Gender. What if the Minister of Gender refuses an issue of investment, one of the items of investment, like she did on Nachigalad? Yet the Minister of Finance, who is in charge, has already approved it. So I think much as the unions envisaged it would create checks and balance, there are still challenges. And even in our recommendations, one of the recommendations was to give sole supervision to one ministry and let the other ministry, if it's for checks and balances, only appoint the MD and the board. But for checks and, let it only appoint the board, but for checks and balances, because the board does everything. So the committee had recommended the Minister of Gender appoints the board, but the entire supervision of the fund goes back to finance.
Okay, 17 trillion Uganda shillings. That's a lot of money, and it is thought that there are so many stakeholders who want a hand on it. When the name of General Caleb Akandanaho came through at the beginning of this controversy, many thought that perhaps Richard Byarugaba was paying a price. Anything you know about this?
Well, it came up even in the committee, even on social media, because we're supposed to investigate all the information we receive. But when we interacted with the board members, they were clear. They said they had gone for a courtesy visit of their friend. So, and the other issue is a courtesy visit to,
on a 17.9 trillion
to General Saleh. They said it was a think tank. And the second issue was General Saleh has no role in NSSF. He has no responsibility assigned to him to run the fund. So we failed to get any conclusive evidence even to invite him. If someone says I had gone to visit my friend, and the minister repeated it even on the floor of parliament, I had gone to visit my friend, so what are you going to investigate? Because no decision was taken to that effect. There was no proof of a decision that was taken after that meeting. So we failed to get conclusive case to even invite General Saleh to the committee.
Okay. Asha Wilson, we're throwing this back to the crisis that saw Zoe Bakoko Bakoro speak about the fact that NSSF was a victim of hands behind the scenes that have a lot of power and want to touch this money. Do you, when General Kalibak and Anaho, Salim Saleh's name comes forth, whether it was a meeting between friends or not, doesn't this speak of a financial behemoth that we do not know exactly where and how the money gets taken, spent, or allocated?
I think we have a problem in this country where when people fail to manage their own affairs, they try to create power center somewhere to try to see to show people that they are
not the problem.
They are affiliated to that center, because somebody knows that Salim Saleh is a hardworking person. Is powerful. Now, if I want to follow this, why don't I use his name? So I think the minister was trying to use his name, but I don't think it was anywhere in this saga.
Do you find any credibility in Zoe Bakoko Bakoro's remarks more than 17 years ago about the fact that money is siphoned from the National Social Security Fund by powerful individuals?
Let me tell you, I was very clear to you. When in 2009, we rose up against government dipping hands in the NSSF. There were so many scandals.
That's right.
Leave alone the Bakoko Bakoro, there was Temangalo and the rest. We as workers, we said no. Personally, we went and had a meeting with the president, and we told him we need to review all what is happening. We want governance of this fund. And that's when His Excellency, the president, by then the vice president was Bukenya. He told Bukenya, handle the issue of the workers. What do they want? And we told them we want the governance of the we took over the governance and recruited a new team. Actually, the team of Biarugaba, Jardine, and the rest was our making. After that, the fund, we actually detached the fund almost from the government manipulation. The only problem where we were juggling with was the money being in finance without the social aspect, where the policy was in Minister of Gender and the money was the Minister of Finance. And we, in this amendment of the new law, we married all that and purely brought the fund to a certain extent. Now the issue of political interference was solved at that level. But now it's cropping up again because of the political, and when we were amending this law, we had consultation with the president. At one point, I remember very well, the president cautioned the minister. He said, my daughter, please go slow on this, because your predecessors had a problem into this water. So you can see, he was already seeing a problem in this.
I'm afraid it all sounds like there is an elephant in the room, and many stakeholders know, but won't say it. Let's leave it at that. Redemption of social welfare in the country. Is there any benchmark? I don't know how Kenya is doing it. I'm yet to study extensively how the National Social Security Fund is being run in Kenya. What I know, there are calls for reform to be able to increase the amount of money that is saved by the workers. But if we are to look at a clear path to effective social welfare for a country like Uganda, given our challenges, the political, the economic, and even aspects of attitude within the population, how best can we craft a social welfare program to move forward?
First of all, I don't want us to be so harsh on ourselves. This fund has grown to 17
yeah, sure, it
trillion.
has, no doubt.
The Kenyan president actually was rebuking their people and said, look at a small country like Uganda, their NSSF is this much and stuff like that. So, yes, there are weaknesses, but we shouldn't throw out the baby with the bathwater. we should say, yes, we've done a good job, but how can we make it better? First, we need to resolve the issues of corporate governance. Board composition, how is the board appointed, who supervises, and so on. Secondly, this issue of having managers stay for long, and I've done 2 terms and then I've hit a retirement age and then I'm like this and that. So recruit competent people. If you put out an interview, number 1 should be recruited, except there's a very serious reason as to why he shouldn't take up the position. But this issue of advertising, then number 5, number 1 is rejected, then number 5 is appointed. I think that is completely wrong. And once it starts at the top, it goes to other departments. That's why you have this whole issue of our friend, I don't want to mention his name, because once the manager is whatever, then you have another person saying, okay, why don't I recruit my wife and my sister and my sisters, and my grandfather, then you have a problem. See? So let's start from the top and cascade it down. Then finally, NSSF needs to build trust. Because if I'm an employer and the economy is this bad, every small business, I would think twice. Forget the law. I would think twice before sending my money to NSSF. Say, let me first watch until things stabilize. So naturally, if we follow the numbers, you're going to see a drop, because employers also follow these things and they're like, I can't send my money when I'm not sure that it will be well managed.
Gentlemen, it's bottom of the hour. We need to take a break. When we return, we shall cease completely from adding any other chapter on the Book of Lamentations, so that we can look at how best we can be able to make the best of money when we have it. There are those who are saying 17.9 trillion Uganda shillings can do a lot if we know where and how to channel it.
The spotlights. Watching Morning at NTV.
Welcome back. Let's now enter our final segment of our Kickstarter today, the 3rd day of June 2023. My guests are Honorable Mwine Mpaka, the Chairman of the Select Committee on NSSF, MP for Mbarara City South. I also have with me John Walgembe, the Executive Director of the Federation for Small and Medium Enterprises, as well as the indefatigable Chairman General of the National Organization of Trade Unions, Asher Wilson. Let me go to the Honorable Minister and ask the question, not Minister, MP.
I think in the next cabinet.
In the next, I've just blessed the gentleman. Pretty good. Now, let me ask you the fundamental question. 17.9 trillion Uganda shillings. Many stakeholders see this as capital lying idle for investment, and many have suggested that a module should be developed that sees some of this money lent out. Now that would effectively make NSSF a lender, which would destabilize social welfare itself. These are questions that have been asked. They will be debated, perhaps at the right moment. If the reform debate comes to Parliament, how would you approach it?
Well, I think the current formula, I have seen it growing from 1.7 trillion to 17 trillion. The current formula would not be bad, because when you do a cross-culture analysis, in other countries there may be less political interference. So you may go for a model and you open up loopholes for people to misuse that opportunity. When you look at the current NSF in 2010, you lent money to Uganda Clays, 11.5 billion. To date, it has accrued interest. It's now about 24 billion. They have never paid a single coin. If I remember, they just paid an interest of around 250.
Uganda Clays has never paid.
It has never paid. And this is the model you are advocating for. So I think the technical experts need to analyze it. But personally, when you do a cross-culture analysis of the situation in our country, I think the current model is safer for the saver than going the direction of giving or lending to institutions or individuals.
Okay. John Walgembe?
Well, I wouldn't recommend turning NSSF into a bank that does lending, but I would look at NSSF playing a catalytic role in the economy. not to help businesses, but because you must grow business. NSSF must also take the responsibility of supporting the growth of businesses. As I've mentioned, all this money comes from businesses at the end of
The question is how?
How exactly I'm coming. We talked about the 50 billion slash fund. No one is claiming it. There's no person out there saying NSSF has not given me my money because I sent money, but I didn't say it goes to Chris, it goes to... So that money can be used to support startups. Already the NSSF is doing it under High Innovator with MasterCard Foundation. So they can just increase that model by investing more resources. Okay? So I wouldn't recommend NSSF doing direct lending or lending these kinds of money of at 11. I think it's too much, it's too risky. But if you do startups, because startups need 5 million, 10 million, and so on, this is the kind of CSR that NSSF should be engaged in, not giving 6 billion to whoever.
And you also and you also have the issue just before you have the issue of midterm access.
Midterm access.
So people are taking the money every day. So and this kind of lending at times is for long term, for you to get the interest, the best interest for the saver. So it may also have an implication.
No, what is now lacking is the structure. Political structure. When you look at Minister of Labour, it's supposed to be together with Social Security. And actually, before I leave this studio, I want to recommend that since Honorable Parker is here, let the merger of remove actually Minister of Department of Labour from the other many ministries. You know, there are so many departments.
Of course, there's a current rationalization going on.
You find Minister of Gender has women, disabled, culture, and so on. It's not related to labor. So remove it from there, merge it with the Minister of Public Service, then you bring Social Security. You call it Minister of Labor, Public Service, and Social Security. And this will create a very formidable and vibrant social security system in the country. Because now you have labor, you have public service, and you have social security in one docket. And that will run very, very well, where Minister of Finance can now just oversee it from another angle. And then you build the country.
Okay.
And that's how we are going to solve this problem. The problem of social security now is the structure. As much as the NSSF has put up a very good system, but it's now divided into many hands. Politics, Minister of Finance, then you find Minister of Gender, which is also has Katogo. It's not related
to for the uninitiated who are watching, Katogo is effectively a cocktail of all things. Now, Asha Wilson-Oweri, many thanks. John Walgembe, thanks too. And of course, thanks to Honorable Minem Parker for making time and sharing your perspectives on this very pertinent issue. I do hope that in the coming weeks, after this particular report by the IGG is digested well, especially by the President, we shall have what Asha Wilson-Oweri wants, a political solution from the head of state. Thanks for watching. Let's now go to Entebbe, where borders are up in arms after the latest effort by municipal authorities there want to realign how they work and make business and services better. City, so to speak. All right, Ivan K. Walinyolo is at hand. Let's now cross over. A very good morning, Ivan.